Well, hi there. Hello and welcome. I am Jed Helm, a Kaplan GRE teacher, and I am so excited to have you guys here for this quick GRE bootcamp. The GRE is a important standardized test, an important milestone in your journey to continuing your education, and we're going to talk about what you can expect from it. But then also, we'll look at some questions together and ways for you to actually improve your score between wherever you would be right now and where you need to be come test day. There are a number of programs that require the GRE. In fact, most graduate degree programs do, but you should totally do research with the program that you're actually interested in, because not all programs are the same. So go to the website, but also talk to the admissions office. I encourage you to actually get in touch with those folks and talk to them about their requirements, their expectations. They should be able to give you a good sense of where you need to be on the GRE so that you have a good target score in mind as well. But the advantage of a standardized test is it's always the same. So as long as you're willing to invest your time and resources, you can earn any score that you want to on it, right? We can make sure we're absolutely prepared for this thing and put it aside so that we can continue our career. I am joined today. Hi, Verda. I'm joined today by the amazing Paul Forn, who's also a Kaplan GRE teacher. He's going to be there in the chat. Please talk to us in the chat. Let us know what questions you have. We want you to participate as much as you can. Our learning science team tells us that the more students participate in a lesson of any sort, the more they take away from it. So say hello, ask your questions. Paul's there to answer questions too. There's nothing about the GRE that Paul doesn't know. Okay. But with that in mind, let's actually look. So we're going to talk through what is actually on the GRE first, in terms of the format of the test, in terms of the scoring of the test, all of those things. And then like I said, have some questions for us to work through together. And I'm going to give you a preview of some of Kaplan's strategies that you can use to get questions right faster and easier. But in order to master those skills, you're going to have to put some time and practice in. And there are loads of options for how to do that practice. But the most important thing is that you actually do prepare yourself adequately for this. And that shouldn't be a surprise, right? In some ways, doing the prep is part of the task. Just like when you go to see the doctor, which doctor do you want? Do you want the doctor who's winging it or the doctor who prepared? You want to see the doctor who prepared, right? So that's part of the whole test and experience is making sure that you are the type of person who will take these things seriously and prepare for them and be ready. So, how important is the GRE? Well, again, it does depend on the individual program you're looking at. There are absolutely programs that do not require the GRE at all. But when we surveyed admissions officers at all sorts of different programs as to what the most important part of an application was, this is what they told us. And tell us in the chat if there's anything here that surprises you. But it's pretty clear that the GRE is at least a very important piece, if not the most important piece of your application. Many schools use this as a cutoff point that you've got to have a certain score for them to even consider your application. So it is as important as your GPA, and in many cases more so. But of course, programs look at this thing holistically too. So making sure that we have a strong application throughout is to our advantage. If we know that we have a weaker application for whatever reason, a great GRE score can differentiate us from the crowd, can make up some of that ground. Okay, now, trends. Yes, data. So we've actually seen in recent years that more and more folks are opting into taking the GRE test. More and more folks are choosing to go back to graduate school, which is wonderful. We need those folks, folks just like you. And you might expect that because so many more people are taking the test, that the average score on the GRE would decline somewhat or be about the same. But what we found is actually that's not the case at all. That in both quant and verbal, scores are improving year over year. And this is, we think, because the people that are choosing to go back to school are making sure that they are prepared. So just like you right now, they're doing the right things in terms of making sure that they get the materials they need and asking questions of experts and actually sitting down and studying the things that they need to learn, relearning some of the things that they may have forgotten. In fact, I wonder if you would tell me in the chat if which is it that you think you'll prefer when you take your actual GRE? Is it the verbal or the quant that is going to be the one you're better at in the near term anyway? We can make sure that you're good at both. Now, the GRE also does a weird thing in that the test adapts to you. So it's actually really good news if after your first set of questions, let's say quant questions, right? You get 20 quant questions. If your second set of questions, your second section of quant, feels much more difficult, well, that's actually great news, because that means you've done very well on the first section, and the GRE weights your score according to the difficulty level of the questions that you see. So it's not as simple as just get as many answers right as possible, although that's a pretty good rule of thumb. It also depends on the difficulty level of those questions. So it's to your advantage to do very well on the first section and then see a very difficult second section, even if we don't do as well on that section, because that's where the highest scores come from. Now, in order to get to that most difficult material, and in terms of quant, we're often talking about things like probability, combinatorics, so combinations and permutations and other different counting methods, stats, those sorts of things. In order to get to that material, we still have to have a very firm grasp of the other material that the GRE tests, though, so that we can get into that hard material. So we've got to be good at proportions and algebra and arithmetic and number properties, all those things that the GRE tests. That said, there's not a whole long list of stuff that you need to know in terms of either quant or verbal for the GRE. Sure, there's some formulas you need to know, but all of that stuff will fit on one 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Sure, having a great vocabulary will help in the verbal section, but just having a great vocabulary is not sufficient. It's not enough by itself in order to guarantee that you're going to get a great score. And in fact, we can often get many right answers without knowing what all the words mean because of the way the GRE tests your verbal reasoning skills. And I do want to emphasize that this is verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning. And in both cases, they're using the subject matter of grammar and English and arguments and math to test your reasoning abilities, to test the way you approach things. Oftentimes on the GRE, in fact, usually there are shortcuts built into problems for folks that are, approaching things in the right way. Learning where those shortcuts are, learning how to recognize which tools to use when, is really to your advantage come test day. It can make a huge difference how we approach a question in terms of how much time we spend on it and how hard we have to work on it. They're very good at combining different quant topics, different types of verbal reasoning skills in novel ways. But if we know where those edges are, we have a huge advantage. Diana, you think that verbal might be better for you? Cool, great. We want you to lean in on that because most programs, you'll see when you get in touch with your individual program, but most programs will have, they're most worried about your combined score. So you're going to have a quant score and a verbal score separate that are then combined. And most programs, that's the number that they'll give you if you ask them what sort of score you need to be competitive at their program. So lean in on that. And we want to maximize that verbal score because that's where we get most of our points. But Also, there's still, as long as you devote a few weeks, a few months to practicing, there's no reason that you can't make significant gains in your quant score as well. I do want to note that you will see 2 quants and 2 verbals for sure. And then you're also going to see the writing. The writing is the first thing. The first hour of the GRE is a writing portion. You have 2 essays to write. And those are graded by human beings. They don't contribute to your overall score. But the quant and verbal sections, they can appear in any order. So there's no way to know whether after you get done writing your essays, you're going to see verbal first or quant first. And then from there on out, it could be higgledy-piggledy. All we know for sure is that you're going to see at least 2 quants and at least 2 verbals. Now, I'm emphasizing that at least bit because there's also this experimental section that many students see. And an experimental section is unscored. It does not contribute to your overall score. It will look just like a quant or a verbal section. Was it doing there? Well, they're testing out future questions. Because remember that your score is based on the difficulty level of the questions. So the way they determine how difficult the questions are is they give them to test takers, even though they don't contribute to that test taker's score. That allows them to set the difficulty level and thus the amount of points that those questions are worth. Because of that, because there's this mysterious unscored experimental section, you could see as many as 5 of these quant and verbal sections on your test. There's no way to know. You're not going to be able to recognize which section is the experimental one. It could be the first one you see after the writing section. It could be the last one you see. There's simply no way for us to know. So don't let that throw you off your game. Do your best on every section that you see. Don't worry about whether it's the experimental or not. And then as soon as you're done with a section, no matter how poorly you think it went or how well you think it went, let it go. Forget about it, because there's nothing we can do about it now. So just approach every section that you see on your test as strategically as you can, as thoughtfully as you can, as quickly as you can. And then as soon as we're done with it, we move on. By the way, if you've never taken a practice GRE, Kaplan gives away free practice GRE tests all the time. And in fact, Paul, would you go ahead and put a link in the chat? I don't know if a link will work there, but if you go to captest.com/events, you'll be able to sign up for a free GRE practice test. We give them all the time. We have an asynchronous one, if you wanted to do it on your own time, that's also an option. But this is an important part of us making sure we get to where we need to go. I know some of you are like, well, Jed, I don't want to take a practice test yet because I haven't studied. But that's exactly why I want you to take a practice test, because you won't know what to study until you have. You won't know what your strengths and weaknesses are until you actually do go and take a practice test. So I encourage all of you to sign up. There's Paul. Paul's got the link. And take a practice test. Find out where you are right now without doing any work. That will be an instructive exercise in and of itself, because you'll learn a lot about the GRE along the way. It's not very much fun, I know, but it's important. And then we'll have a roadmap, right? Then you'll know, am I better at verbal or am I better at quant? What sorts of math concepts do I need to relearn and practice? What sort of verbal questions are the ones that give me a harder time? Is it the short verbal, or is it the critical reasoning, or is it the long form reading comp? Knowing where our strengths and weaknesses are allow us to do much better study. So I encourage all of you, before you even sit down with a book, sign up for a free practice test. Get a starting score so you know where you're coming from, and so you know how much work you need to do and what sort of work you need to do. All right. Well, but before I even get into questions, does anybody have questions for me about the GRE, the format of the GRE, how the adaptive part of the test works, how the scoring works generally, Any questions, I'm happy to answer right now. And again, we have the amazing Paul Forn here too, who's also a GRE teacher and is happy to answer your questions too. Please, the more questions you ask, the fewer you'll have on test day. The other thing I want to mention, because there aren't that many questions that you're going to see for both quant and verbal, right? There's only 40. Getting a couple more right answers can make a huge difference in your score. A couple more right answers can catapult us into that most difficult second section, and that will make a huge difference to our score. So this is worth doing and worth investing some time in. You actually can make a big difference in your score. Diana, great question. So the essays, the very first thing you see, there's going to be two of them. One of them asks you to analyze an argument, and the other one asks you to make an argument. They're pretty straightforward. They're graded by human beings, and there's a rubric that you can find in our book or online for how that grading works. Basically, for most of us, especially if you're looking at a healthcare type program, right? Physical therapy, occupational therapy, master's in nursing, right? All of those programs want to see that you do have good written communication skills, but that's not the main thrust of the program. So we want to do well on it, but we don't have to worry about maximizing our score there. So long as we're not in the frowny face part of the scale, we're okay. My advice is you can find sample prompts. And in fact, there's a whole treasure trove of sample prompts on the ETS website, who are the test maker. Our practice test comes with some sample prompts too. Try it out is my best advice. What they're really looking for is a well-organized, structured essay that responds to the prompt and is written in standard English. So, one, actually structure your essay. And this doesn't have to be fancy. You probably want an introductory paragraph, a couple, 2 or 3 paragraphs making your major points, and then a conclusion paragraph. That's all you need to do to have a structured essay. And then write in standard English, right? If you don't know how to spell a word, use a different word, right? That the word processor that they give you is pretty basic. It's not going to do spell check for you. It's not going to do grammar check for you. But it's important that we respond to the prompt and write a well-organized essay. They're not looking for brilliance here. They're just looking to see if you can, demonstrate good written communication skills. Good question, Diana. Thanks for asking that. And you can find plenty more on our website, or again by talking to Paul right now. Paul has all the details on all the things if you got a follow-up question. Okie dokie. So let's actually talk about getting a higher score on quant and verbal. Some big overarching strategic takeaways. First, don't just dump into the question right away. Think. Figure out what sort of thing they're asking for. Figure out the area of math. Figure out how you want to approach the question before you do any work. Because often, as I've been saying, there are shortcuts for people who are looking for them. So don't just jump in. And by examining the content, we often find clues, right? We often find hints as to what the answer needs to be, and or important information that we're going to have to use in order to solve for the answer. So make sure that you're using all that information. One of my favorite places to look for hints or clues is the answer choices themselves. For instance, in the quant section, if you see that the answer choices are all real numbers, that means you're definitely going to have to solve something, for sure, 100% of the time. On the other hand, if the answers are variables, you probably don't need to solve something. But on the other hand, that's a huge tip to me that we should probably use one of my favorite Kaplan strategies, which is picking numbers. Rather than doing the complicated algebra, it's probably going to be faster and easier to turn that into arithmetic just by picking a couple numbers. And that's going to make our life a lot easier. So the answers can contain important information for us as well. Thirdly, use elimination. Sometimes some of the answers can't possibly be right based on what you've been given. And if you can eliminate down to 2 answer choices, back solving is a fantastic strategy to use, right? You just try one real quick. And if it's not that one, it's the other one. So again, looking for opportunities to use the format of the test to our advantage is always something we want to do. Fourth, all right, we've done our analysis. We figured out what we can. Now we got to attack. Now we got to get in there. I will say, though, if you're doing well on the GRE, even if you're not doing well on the GRE, just about everybody sees stuff that is too hard for them. It's the nature of the test, right? That first section is sort of a smorgasbord of high and low and medium difficulty questions. And based on that, we get put into another section, which, will be a narrower range for us, but probably is going to have some stuff that's a little bit of a stretch for us and some stuff that is a little bit below our level too. Because of that, make sure that you are attacking questions in the best order for you. On the GRE, you're totally allowed to skip things. You should answer every single question. Let's be clear. There's no penalty for guessing. You should answer every single question to the best of your ability. But that doesn't mean you should spend time on every single question. If you recognize, hey, this is actually way too hard for me, I'm going to spend 10 minutes on this one question, I don't have time for that, great. Mark a guess, move on. One of the things about the GRE test interface is you have the ability to mark questions for review later. So this is just like if you had a test booklet, right? You could circle the question real big and come back to it. Same thing on the GRE, right? If you realize, hey, this question is probably one that I want to save for last or save for later, there's a button you just click and you can mark it for review later. And before you exit the section, right? Before you turn in this section on the computer, there's a review screen. Always check the review screen because it also shows you whether you answered all the questions, and we want to make sure we answered all the questions. But then on that screen, it'll show you any ones that you marked, and you can easily navigate back to those. And if you have extra time, spend it then. But understanding the format of the section, understanding where our strong points are, allows us to approach the section in the most strategic fashion. The question we always ask is, where's my next easiest point? If it's the question right in front of you, great, do that one. If it's not the question right in front of you, go find another one to do. And the GRE, because it's standardized, is really predictable as to where they put stuff. When you get to verbal, the first questions are going to be text completion. Then there's going to be some reading comp. Then there's going to be sentence equivalence. And then there's going to be a bunch of reading comp every single time. When you get to quant, the first thing you're going to be asked, do you guys want to know what the first quant question is going to ask you? I already know what it's going to ask you. Hey, what's the relationship between these two quantities? Which one's bigger? And in fact, the first few questions are going to ask you that because that's where quantitative comparison is in the section. So if that's a strength of yours, yeah, we want to hustle through those. That's great. But if we know that that's not our strength and we're better at problem solving or we're better at data interpretation, which is where we analyze graphs, well, let's go do that stuff first. So we make sure we have enough time to play to our individual strengths. But once we're sure that this is the question we want to attack, get in there. All right, last but not least, employing the right strategy. I liken this to having a toolbox with my students. If the only strategy you have, the only tool that you have is a hammer, then you're going to grab your hammer every time you have to solve a problem, right? And the hammer might be doing traditional math. Traditional math is great. It works. But it's not always the most elegant solution, right? And if you've seen some of the ways I've been a handyman in my own house with a hammer, I think you'd agree with me, right? A hammer is not always the best tool. So by having more strategies to use, by having more tools in our toolbox, a screwdriver, a wrench, some pliers, right? Suddenly you have a lot more options for reaching into your toolkit and pulling out the right tool for the job. And so the more strategies you learn and have, the easier this test gets. I know that that might seem like, well, geez, Jed, I'm doing a lot of work for not a lot of questions. Yeah, but on the other hand, having the right tool makes these questions way easier. So by investing time up front, right? If we work very hard between now and our test day, then on actual test day, we can be more lazy, right? And then we have more advanced tools to use, so we don't have to work as hard. Celine, yes, indeed. And in fact, we are going to start with verbal, and we will talk right now about some skills you can use to improve your vocabulary. There's a lot of ways to improve vocabulary. I want to be clear on that. That we recommend and have in our book all of the most common words that are used on the GRE. So ones that you can study there. We recommend that students study word groups. That is, groups of words that have the same or a similar definition. Cognitive science shows that is an especially effective strategy because it gives you more connections between words, so it's easier for you to recall that information. And then also, knowing some word roots can make a big difference. So particularly in English, if you have a Romance language, Spanish, French, that can be a huge advantage. Italian, because a lot of our loan words are borrowed from those languages, and a lot of English words, right, are based on Latin roots. If you know Greek roots, there are many English words that are based on Greek roots too, right? So we can leverage those things to our advantage. But as I said at the top, having a wonderful vocabulary is great and helpful, but it ain't enough by itself. So as we look at this question, in fact, instead of looking at this question, what if, I'm going to put a sample prompt in here. What if I gave you, I'm the test writer, and I told you this is the sample prompt. Teacher Paul is blank. Teacher Paul is blank. What could go into that blank? What sort of word? Give me some examples of words that I could put into that blank about Teacher Paul. What is Teacher Paul? You don't even have to be nice. Teacher Paul has a thick skin. He's been teaching for Kaplan for years and years. He's seen it all. What could Teacher Paul be? I suppose Teacher Paul could be smart. He's a teacher. Yeah, Celine is on the same page. Teacher Paul could be funny. Teacher Paul could be tall. Teacher Paul could also be short and mean and coughy. Right? No, he could have a terrible cough. He could be sick. That's right, Paul. Teacher Paul could be sick. So right, if it could be, he could be charismatic. He's demonstrating that right now. Right? There's like any word we want. We could stick into that blank. And as the test writer, I would have failed at my job, right? That would not be a good prompt. Teacher Paul is blank, because how am I going to decide whether an answer is right or wrong? There's no way. So what the test maker has to do is they have to use the logic of the sentence to define the blank. In other words, they have to tell you what the blank means in the sentence. So the essence of the Kaplan strategy on these short verbal questions is to use that to our advantage and just figure out what the blank means ahead of time. Now, I know a lot of you see a question like question 1 here, and what you do is you read through it, and then you're like, great. And then you look at the words and you pick one that seems to match. And then you read back through, and if it sounds good, you move on with life. But that's going to get you into trouble. Because there's a word here that looks like it absolutely belongs in this sentence, right? Some people's dreams are strengthened by cycles of adversity and blank. Very different experiences can contribute to a common end. You see that word adversity, and which word here jumps off the page as being the one as that you're like, yeah, that looks like it goes with adversity. That sounds good. Which word here? Be brave. Get something wrong. Learn a thing. That is how we learn, right? Is we make mistakes. So make a mistake. Or don't make a mistake. Get it right. That'd be even better. Which word here matches adversity? Looks like it totally belongs in the sentence. Hardship. Hardship, right? And if you select hardship, you're going to get this question wrong. Because it does not match the meaning of the sentence. Notice that it says they're strengthened by cycles of one thing and another. And then the second half really does the work. Very different experiences. That's right. Marla, on the nose. Because it says very different experiences, the right answer has to be different from adversity. That's right. It has to be triumph. Triumph is the only right answer here. But if you're reading for what sounds good, oh, you're going to get yourself into much trouble. So in Kaplan, what we do is we analyze first, and then we come up with some sort of prediction. And because I am extremely lazy, I mean, not in my prep, but when I'm taking the test, I'm extremely lazy. My prediction on this question, no joke, would be different from adversity. That's my prediction. Any word that means different from adversity is the one I'm going for. I'm just using what they've given me. Okay, so I'm looking for something that's different from adversity. Hardship? No. Malaise? No. Fortification? Weird. Stress? No. Triumph? Oh yeah, that's different from adversity. That's the one I want. Using the logic ahead of time, letting them define the blank for you, coming up with a prediction, not only makes you more accurate, but also makes you faster. Because I would argue that triumph probably isn't the hardest word here. Malaise is probably the word that is least commonly used in the English language. It's not always the hardest word. It's the word that matches the meaning of the sentence is the one that we're looking for. So making sure we're doing that work ahead of time means that we can very quickly eliminate wrong answers and use that elimination to our advantage. All right. Well, now I have sentence equivalence. I want you to know a couple things about this question, and then no spoilers in chat. No spoilers in chat. Notice that the answers here have boxes. Anytime on the GRE that you see that the letters of the answers have boxes around them rather than circles, right? On the previous question, we had the actual words. Here we have boxes. When we get into Quant, you're going to see that the letters are circled. But anytime we have boxes, and this can happen in Quant too, that means we have to select multiple answers. Now, a couple notes about this. On the GRE, there is no partial credit. So either you select all the right answers and you get the point, or you don't select the right answers, or you select some of the right answers, or you select all the right answers, but you also picked a different one, and you get none of the points. I know that stinks, but that's the way it is. So we have to be prepared for that. And on these sentence equivalence questions, we want to pick two answers, exactly two answers. There's going to be about 4 of these per section, so about 8 for the whole test. And they're right in the middle of the section. We need to select 2 answers on each one of these, exactly 2, in order to get the points. Now, do we want to select 2 synonyms? Maybe. The words don't have to be synonymous. The job is the 2 words have to make the sentence mean the same thing. So those words can be synonyms, that's fine, but they don't need to be synonyms. And you certainly can't just select any old 2 set of synonyms that you see, because as you see here, where there's a couple sets of synonyms in the answer choices, right? So we got to be careful. Once again, we have to use the logic of the sentence to figure out which are the right answers. Well, let's do that. So we're told there's a difficulty of great distance. And the difficulty and the great distance. The journey was completed with very little incident and with noteworthy blank. Before I even look at the answers, before I even look. Well, in fact, if you got a paper and pencil, or even just say it out into the universe right now, what you think the two right answers are. Just make it real. Put it out there. Don't put it in the chat yet, though. Okay, now that you've chosen, here we go. Very little incident. Which part of our journey does that speak to? Does that speak to the difficulty of the journey or the distance of the journey? Very little incident. Is that the difficulty or is that the distance? Which part does that respond to? Oh yes, there's participation. I'm going to wait. The little incident. Does it speak to the difficulty of the journey or the distance? Diana, that's exactly right. It's the difficulty, right? If a journey is difficult, you would expect there to be some incident, right? Like the Fellowship of the Ring, right? There'd be like orcs and the snow falling on you and stuff. A big Balrog. So no incidents, even though it was really hard. Great. Now, the other part of this is the distance. The distance. Well, so if we're surprised about this journey, it's noteworthy about this journey. What define the blank for me? What has to go into the blank? If it's a long distance, why are we surprised? What did the journey actually accomplish? If it was really far, what would surprise us? So, Trevor, you're picking answer choices. Before we pick answer choices, we need to know what goes in there. I agree with you that it has to be fast. It has to, whatever goes into the blank has to mean fast, right? Because the journey was really long, so we're surprised because it didn't take us that long. We completed the journey quickly. I agree. And so now our job is simplified. Now we just have to find the two words that mean quickly. Okay. Well, so let's see. Swiftness obviously works. We're all on board for swiftness. But success doesn't mean fast. It just doesn't. It's not right. Renown does not mean fast. Results does not mean fast. Accolades does not mean fast. They're just wrong. So even if you didn't know that alacrity means quickly, you could get this point just by knowing what goes in the blank. This is a really important idea. You don't have to know what all of the words mean in order to get the question right, as long as you are actually predicting what goes into the blank and then sticking to your prediction. Those are the important parts. So the correct answers here are alacrity and swiftness, because those are the two that mean quickly. Now, if you didn't recognize alacrity, no worries. What I want you to do, another tool that we have in our vocab building toolbox, is making a list, either on a piece of paper or on your smart device, of words we don't know, and then looking them up. Get into this habit. I'm serious. Write this stuff down, because you're going to start seeing the same words appear again and again on that list, and then you're going to start learning them, right? The second time it appears on your list, you should be like, oh, right, I already looked this one up. This is what that means. Okay, cool. And then that's another way to help yourself start building up that GRE vocab right now. So if you didn't recognize alacrity, put it on your list. Good. So we've talked text completion. We've talked sentence equivalence. Now we've got to talk reading comp. And some of the reading comp questions will be very familiar to you from, say, the SAT or the ACT, where they, ask about the main idea of a passage, or they ask about a particular detail in the passage. But other questions are going to ask you to do more work. So here we have an inference question. And this inference question is asking us something that must be true based on the statements we've been given. Let's talk about both pieces of that first. If it's based only on the statements that were given, and this is about toys, are you allowed to know anything about toys? Are you allowed to know that Lego are really neat and you put them together and stuff, but if you step on one in the dark, it's the worst feeling in the world, right, on your bare feet? Are you allowed to know that hula hoops are big things that you twirl around with your waist? Is that stuff that you're allowed to know? No! You're only allowed to know what they tell you. And I know you think I'm being silly, but I'm not, because you guys are going to be tempted by answers that are bringing in outside knowledge. And that outside knowledge might be true, but if it's not told to you, you're not allowed to know it. Make sure that when you select an answer on an inference question, it's based only on what's in the passage. And this is true generally in reading comp. One of the most common wrong answers that we see are what we call out of scope answers. Answers that simply don't come from the material you've been given. Now, the second part is more fun. Something that must be true. Please, would you tell me in the chat something that must be true? And don't make it a definition. Tell me a fact about the world that must be true. Always true. Keep it clean. What's the thing that must be true? Trevor, that's a definition. I can't work with that. Diana, that's also a definition. I can't work with that. An octopus has 3 hearts. Yeah, that's just a definition. How about one like this? Then let me try. The sky is blue. This is one I often get when I ask people to say, tell me something that must be true. The sky is blue. Well, is it? Always? Doesn't it depend on what the weather's like? Because sometimes the sky's gray, right? If there's a bunch of clouds in it. And then also, right, depending on the time of day, it might be black with little white specks in because it's nighttime. Or sometimes, like at sunrise and sunset, it's all kinds of different colors, and that's why people like sunrises and sunsets. So I know, again, I'm pushing the limits here, and I'm being a little silly, but I want you to see that in order to say something that must be true, as long as it's not a definition, if it's like a fact, you usually have to include wiggle language, right? You usually have to say something that is like, most of the time or often the sky is blue between the hours of such and such and such and such, assuming that it is not overcast on that day. You have to have these qualifiers, but many people find this unsatisfying. Nobody goes out and gets a tattoo that says the truth, right? People go out and get tattoos that say things like, love conquers all. Is that really true? I mean, isn't the truth more like love conquers some people some of the time, at least for a little while, except for my Uncle Jimmy, right? Like, isn't that really the truth? And so we have to have this qualifying language, except when they give us extreme evidence, right? If the GRE had told me octopuses have 3 hearts, which is cool, and I didn't know. Well, then if an answer choice said, when you're dissecting an octopus, how many hearts can you expect to find? You can say exactly 3, right? Because they have told me. They have told me. So we want to be careful around absolute statements, as Paul is so admirably summing up. That we need to make sure we have evidence that's strong enough to support those ideas. Okay. Well, I just want to be quiet for a minute and let you work on this. And I'm going to grab a quick little sip of my coffee here, and you figure out, well, what should be the right answer here? Okay. The first thing I like to do on a question like this is figure out what sort of things do I have facts about. I know what our goals are at this company. I know what happens to toy manufacturing companies that don't cut the price of their product. I know what is required, which is a pretty strong thing, of toy manufacturers to keep their large retail customers happy. Cool. Those are the only things I'm allowed to know. All right, looking at the first answer choice. Do I know anything about my competitors? Well, if they're manufacturing companies, I would know what would happen if they didn't find ways to cut their prices. Do I know that they will succeed in winning these retailers? No, that's just not in the passage. So the first answer choice is wrong. All right, second answer choice. Our goal, I know about our goal. It's possible to meet only if, that sounds strong, the company can continually cut wholesale prices of our products. That seems pretty strong, but this is stuff I know about. So let me see whether the evidence backs this up. When I go back up, I see our goal is to keep our large retail customers happy. Sweet. And the first sentence lets me know what I need to do that. I have to find ways to continually deliver products on time and at ever lower wholesale prices. Oh, yeah. So can I say that only if we continually cut the wholesale price of our products will we meet our goal? Yeah, absolutely. That is 100% based on the passage and must be true based on the passage. So it's the right answer. Now at Kaplan, we really believe in not just studying the right answers, that's important, but also studying the wrong answers, because your job on test day is to differentiate right answers from wrong ones. And there's a lot to be learned from wrong answers. So that's why on our questions, every single question has explanations of every single answer choice. So let's talk quickly about these other ones. Well, what do I know about toy manufacturers that don't keep their customers happy? I don't know. It doesn't say what happens to them. I certainly don't know what makes them go out of business. And I don't know anything at all about customers generally. I'm only given information about large retail customers. So I don't know. Out of scope. Fourth answer choice. Most retailers are looking for new toy suppliers. Most of them? All I know is about this one company. That's all I know about. I can't say anything about most retailers because I don't know what they're looking for or what they're not. Last one. The customers, again, not large retail customers, just customers, that's problematic, are currently happy. I would have to push back there too, because my customers won't be happy unless I continually cut the price. So they only seem to be happy when I've cut the price, and that means that they're not currently happy with the current price. They're not going to be happy unless I cut the price. So I would say both that this is too general in talking about customers generally, and also it does not actually get supported by the passage. These questions are not easy. They're difficult. They take brain work. That's why we have to be able to speed through the short verbal questions so we can get hard ones like this right, so we have time to do these. By the way, on the side of the screen here, you see the QBank. The QBank is a tool that all of our students get, and you can actually purchase this separately if you want, of lots of practice questions of all different types. And so we're telling you how many many questions of this type you can expect to see and practice with in the QBank for our students. And also we're highlighting some of the GRE channel episodes that focus on this. GRE channel is little 1 hour episodes that we've run out every night live for our students so that they can, focus in on the individual areas they're interested in. All right. Ooh, I'm running low on time, so we got to get through Quant. We got to get to Quant. All right, check this out. The ratio of chips in S to T is 3:2. We're going to add 3 chips to stack S. We're going to subtract the same number from stack T. And then our ratio increases to 2:1. And now I need the total number of chips. Obviously, we're dealing with proportions, ratios, percents, all of which are the same, right? They're just different ways of expressing the same relationship. Although I bet you have a preference as to which one you like to work with. I encourage you to practice enough so that you learn to apply the skills that you already have to all of these different question types. But there's some stuff that we should notice. One, the right answer must be divisible by 5. Why? Well, because the number of chips is 3:2. So the total has to be some multiple of 5 because 3 plus 2 is 5. So if there's 3x and 2x, then the total is 5x. Well, if that's true, we can eliminate 48 as an answer choice. It's not even close. The right answer also must be divisible by 3 because after I've changed stuff around, my new ratio becomes 2:1, and 2 and 1 is 3. And that lets me eliminate 40 and 50. So I only have 2 options here. It's either going to be 30 or 45 chips. So let's just try it. What happens? Well, if our answer is 45, and we'll just plug that in, then T, right? S is going to be 27. T is going to be 18. I'm going to change around where my chips go, take 3 from T and put them in S. And I get 30 to 15, which is a 2:1 relationship. Yeah, so 45 is my right answer. And notice if I had used 30 instead, I just would have gotten a different relationship. It wouldn't have been a 2:1 relationship. And so I would have recognized, oh, well then 30 is not the right answer. So 45 is the only one it could be. This is what I was talking about earlier when I was saying use the answers to your advantage. When I was saying look for shortcuts, look for ways to be creative in attacking these questions. On ratio and proportion questions, because they like to use whole numbers, these are very susceptible to methods like this one, where we can use the answers to our advantage. Is that easy what I just did? Well, not without practice, it's not. But with practice, I think it's pretty straightforward. If you need the practice, then do it. That's what, you can do what I just did. There's no magic there. It was just using the logic of the question to our advantage. And the way I got good at that is I got a lot of these questions wrong, and I learned Kaplan's methods, and I learned to apply Kaplan's methods, and now I can get them right and quickly. Okay. Okay, we can close with this one. This is combinatorics. This is high difficulty. I don't know if I was just out of school that day when these questions were taught, but I did not learn this stuff in school. I had to be taught by Kaplan how to do these. The central point of what we want you to do on many of these questions, there are times we have to apply a formula, but many times we can just use a common sense approach. So we're picking a 4-number code. So let's just figure out what our options are for the 4 numbers. Don't make this hard. So the first number is a multiple of 5 between 0 and 40. The trick here is 0 is a multiple of 5. It's 5 times 0. So it's 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Oh, okay. So there's 9 options for the first code. And notice I'm not picking the number. I'm picking the number of options. There are 9 options for my first digit. The second number is a factor of 28. Well, okay, what are the factors of 28? 1 and 28, that's 2. And then 2 and 14, that's 4. And then 4 and 7, that's 6. So there's 6 factors of 28. All right. The third number must be even. Well, 40 divided by 2 is 20, but we got to remember about 0 again. So there's actually 21 even numbers from 0 to 40. So 21 options there. Okay. And then the last digit is odd. Well, again, is 40 divided by 2 is 20. And this time I don't have to worry about 0, so it's got to be 20. And then what do we do? Well, then we're just going to actually have to put this in, because this is a fill in the blank question. In order to get the right answer, we actually have to put the right numbers into the blank and key them in on our computer. Fortunately, on the GRE, we do get a calculator. It's an on-screen calculator. It is not a nice calculator. It is a silly little 4-function calculator, and you have to use your mouse to click the buttons. It is really easy to make a mistake. But at this point, that's the right way to approach this. Okay, so now we just plug those numbers in, and we get our answer. There's nothing magic that I just did, but I want you to see how they build a difficult question, because this is hard. What did they do? Well, they combined some difficult content areas, starting with combinatorics, combinations, permutations. But then they also included a bunch of stuff about number properties, right? You had to know the difference between odd and even. You had to know how to find multiples. You had to know how to find factors. So they're combining a bunch of skills into one question, and they're not even giving us the advantage of the answers like we had on the previous question to use. I don't want you to be intimidated by questions like this one, because they're totally gettable as long as you practice them. But I do want you to know what you're up against. The test maker, even though they're not drawing on a huge reservoir of math knowledge, are able to come up with quite tricky questions unless you know how to approach them. Okay, I'm just at about time. So I want to stop there and ask you guys if you have any questions for me and Paul about the GRE as it regards to your admissions process, as it regards... Oh, no, Diana, that doesn't sound dumb at all, right? Why is 0 multiple of 5? So to find the multiples of any number, you just multiply that number by every counting number, every integer, right? And so 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5, right? Well, you can do it the other direction too. 5 times 0 is 0. 0 is a multiple of every number, because every number times 0 is 0. So it's just one of those weird definitional things that probably, if you ever did know it 15, 20 years ago, you've forgotten. And so we have to relearn it. Probably when you're studying for the GRE, there are going to be moments where you see stuff and you're like, I used to know this. I used to be good at this. And now I don't know how to do it. And that's okay. You can relearn all of this stuff. But that's why I encourage you to get GRE specific materials, whether that's a Kaplan book or access to our quiz bank or what have you, so that you're not just opening up an old textbook. That's going to be too much stuff. Let's just focus on the stuff that we know is going to be there and relearn that stuff. All right, anything other questions you have for me about literally anything regarding GRE? I got 2 minutes. 2 minutes. You guys have been so great. We really appreciate you being here. And seriously, the fact that you show up to a thing like this is exactly why you're going to be ready for the GRE and you're going to beat it. Oh, Megan. So let's start with the question behind the question. How many times should you take the GRE? Because you only actually have to take it once. So I would say that we should aim to take the GRE once. If we have to take it more than once, that's okay. That's not the end of the world. The GRE does this cool thing called score select, where you get to choose which scores you send to programs. It does cost money, but it really alleviates a lot of the test day stress of, oh my gosh, what if I get a terrible mark? I don't want to show that to anybody. You don't have to, right? With score select, you don't have to, which is great. But on the other hand, taking the GRE is not much fun. It's not cheap. So instead of taking it again and again and again, Megan, what I would suggest is let's take it once. And if you want to know how you would do, don't take the test just to see. That's an expensive way to find out. Sign up for a free Kaplan practice test. Free. No money. We want you to know how you're going to do. Let us help. And that practice test will come with full answers and explanations. It comes with a full score report and our computer tutor will help you figure out what you're good at and what you need to practice. So sign up for one of those first, and then just do the work that you need to do to get to where you want to be. So rather than take a bunch of GREs over and over again, let's get a starting place, and let's only take it once. You can take it multiple times, yeah, of course, but really we don't want to. It really isn't fun, despite my best efforts. Celine, you are so welcome. Thank you for being here. Paul and I really enjoyed having all of you here with us. Please keep working hard, keep studying hard, and thank you so much for prioritizing your profession and helping people. And if we can help you, we want to do it. I want to see you in class. I want to see you on the channel. Let us know how we can be helpful to you too. Thanks all.